With regulation and globalization, how are banking institutions coping? An industry expert explains. Plus, we all learn by making mistakes. We'll talk with the author of a new book who compiled money lessons from the mistakes of successful people. This is 7 Day Yield.
Welcome to 7 Day Yield. I'm Lydia Morish.
And I'm Mitch Rochelle, and here's what's trending. As recent grads enter the workforce, they're bringing with them on average a staggering $30,000 in student debt. A recent study by PwC exposed the fact that shockingly 54% of millennials express concerns over their ability to repay their student loans. A good rule of thumb is for monthly debt service payments not to exceed 10% of your salary. That may be easier said than done.
It seems that after leading the way with technology in the 1980s, asset and wealth managers have become dismissive of technology disruptions to their industry. A recent PwC Global FinTech survey showed that a surprising 60% of asset and wealth management firms fear that part of their business is at risk to fintech companies. Yet only 45% put fintech at the heart of their business strategy. Although many believe that asset and wealth managers will be disrupted by fintech, many industry players still hold the belief that they are immune to disturbance potential of new entrants.
With holiday shopping on our minds, a recent study by PwC reveals that humans aren't the only ones we're buying gifts for. With almost half of American households having pets, on average we'll spend $62 on our furry friends. And get this, millennials will outspend everyone and shell out a shocking $81 on their pets this holiday season. Charlie, I hope you're not watching. That would be my golden retriever. Fact of the matter is, we probably spend more than $60 or $80 because Charlie's gluten-free, believe it or not.
I feel like we should probably do a Twitter poll right now. Which dog is cuter?
Right, so the B-roll is up there right now, and it has Waffles, which is Lydia's dog, and Charlie. So we can do a Twitter poll, whose dog is cuter.
Exactly, so just do #Waffles, right?
Or #Charlie.
Hashtag Waffles.
I know who's going to win. Anyway, I'm joined by another one of my partners who has more frequent flyer miles than me. Byron Carlock does, now you do. So Dan, who is our financial services advisory leader for PwC in the U.S., is often found tweeting at like 3 o'clock in the morning from some hotel somewhere around the world, visiting our global banking clients around the world. So in your travels, what's your sense, Dan, of the global banking environment in light of all the disruption around the world?
Clearly, global banking, if you want to talk broadly, is still in a kind of a disruptive and a recovery phase. On a relative basis, the U.S. banks are way ahead of their global competitors. The European banks, who largely ruled the last couple decades, will really become regional players in the future, and the world will be dominated by big Asian banks and big U.S. banks.
When I think about regulation, there's a tremendous amount of headwind around regulation. How does a multinational financial institution really manage all of those different regulatory regimes and if not tax regimes around the world?
Yeah, it's tough. And so the reality is you've got to figure out realistically, where do you need to do business? You need to do business in the U.S. It represents, still it's the largest economy globally. You got to be able to do business in Asia, particularly in China, and then broadly across the European continent, right? So, when you look at the regulatory regimes, the U.S. is by far the toughest, and that's one of the reasons that they're ahead on a relative basis. And then when you look at the stuff that's going on around Brexit, it's actually going to make it much more of a challenge because there is no Europe as it relates to financial institutions. It's largely a country-by-country play. Regulation, on the other hand, to tell you the truth, is really a competitive advantage when it comes to the fintech disruptors. Because fintech firms, the minute that they get so close that they become a bank, they run away. So for banks, they're starting to look at regulation and say, A, it's a competitive advantage relatively. So meaning if I'm a US bank, I'm safer, sounder, I have a passport, I can actually do better than my global competitors. And then as it relates to fintech, I can use it as a barrier. So fintech firms can only go so far in terms of encroaching on my business.
So we mentioned in the headlines that only about half of companies are putting fintech at the heart of their business strategy. Why do we think so many other companies are slow to embrace this?
Yeah, look, one of the core weaknesses of most financial institutions is actually technology. So they haven't invested a ton in technology, particularly as it relates to how they interact with their customers. So most banks were designed around products, not around customers. And the future, it's all about the customer, right? How does the customer access you? How do you interact with your customer? So the banks are really struggling to get behind that. fintech is really, it's disruptive, everyone's afraid of it. On the other hand, more banks have bought fintech firms than actually, any other option out there. So I think banks are embracing fintech, but they're doing it a bit more through acquisition than kind of internal development.
Last question, Dan. There's been a lot of stories in headlines without naming names about sales practices of banks. This is going to get more and more regulatory scrutiny, I suspect. So what's the landscape like right there right now?
Well, they've regained their balance sheets and their capital bases. They haven't regained the confidence of the public, their customers, and Washington. And I think what you've seen happening across the industry is really, a heavy focus on just that. How do we it's a bit more about regaining confidence with customers. And once again, the regulations will ultimately drive that. I think the biggest problem the banks have is not the regulators, it's getting their customers to kind of trust them as they move forward.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dan. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Financial literacy gets a lot of airtime on 7-Day Yield, and for good reason. A new book takes a look at the lessons we can all learn from money from some of the world's most successful people. Mitch sat down with the book's author, Bobbi Rebell. Take a listen.
So Bobbi, why'd you write the book and why now?
Mitch, it came down to cold, hard facts. As a reporter at Reuters, all this data comes across my desk, including quite a bit from PwC. And when you see a statistic like 92% of K-12 educators believe we should be teaching financial literacy in schools, and yet only 12% are doing it, and that is a PwC fact, you start paying attention to yourself, and you start thinking, what can I do? What can I bring to the table as a Reuters reporter, as a financial journalist? And I thought, I'm going to get celebrity CEOs and celebrities in general and get them to say something compelling about their own personal financial experiences and then give some advice. In the end, it ended up being 30 role models with stories woven through this book, which I'm so proud of and I'm so excited for people to read.
And it's really neat because it articulates the voice of these individuals. But when you look across the 30, any common themes come out in terms of the lessons that they learned in their life?
Yeah, they all really focused on being purposeful in taking control of their lives and their financial lives. One of my favorite stories is Drew Barrymore. Many people think she had everything handed to her because her grandfather was a very famous actor. She had to be emancipated as a minor by, I believe, age 14, where she was working really odd-end jobs like waitressing and such to pull herself together. Now she runs a production company, a film production company, Flower Films, with many successful hits. She has a beauty business, and it's really impressive.
So when you look at those stories, did somebody grab them and teach them these lessons, or are they all self-taught?
A lot of them were self-taught by circumstances because you find yourself in unexpected situations that you never planned for, and it's a wake-up call for people. So for example, Sally Krawcheck, one of the most successful women on Wall Street, had a real wake-up call, and we refer to it as the sex scandal in the books, and she really had to step up and be a grown-up and take control of her life in a way that she really should have been doing beforehand.
So empowerment, purpose, that's what drove these people. But at the beginning, you were talking about what schools aren't doing.
Yes.
And is there sort of a big takeaway in terms of the gap between what schools are doing and what these successful individuals ended up doing for themselves?
Well, I think it comes down to self-sufficiency, and we as parents have to be very careful in how much we help our children, because we have this term called helicopter parenting, and it's become very controversial. Yeah, we all do it because we want to give to our children, but we have to let them learn that they ultimately have to be very self-sufficient. I mean, even the story about Ivanka Trump, and certainly she was born with a lot of, it's a nice starting line, let's just say that. Ivanka Trump had a nice starting line, but in the story that she tells, she talks about the fact that her parents said, what we have is ours. You have to build your own future, and we have to let our children build their own future. Even though we can give them a head start, give them all the tools that we want, they have to learn that in the end, it's on them, and they have to be their own financial grown-up.
Right. So in looking at the book last night, several of the CEOs told stories about their first car purchases.
I love the car theme. So this, first of all, the crazy thing is this is generally the men, which is interesting. Now, one of them was PwC's Bob Moritz, who's one of our role models. He tells a wonderful story. I don't know how much I want to spoil it.
So should I say spoiler alert right now?
Spoiler alert. Bob Moritz gave up his car that he loved to achieve a goal. So you have that car story, but then you have Jim Cramer, who actually lived in his car, and I'm not going to tell people why. So people have to read the book to figure out, why was Jim Cramer living in his car?
Right. So
last question, there's a linkage between Donors
There
Choose
is.
and the book, so why don't you share that with us?
Well, absolutely. Well, I have PwC to thank for that. I asked who would be a good charity partner because I did want to give back, and they did suggest Donors Choose. So we did reach out. We have a partnership where we are raising money for Donors Choose. My page is donorschoose.org/Financial Grownup. If anyone wants to help out, have to plug that. But also, if people buy the book, send in a receipt. We'll send you a gift card for that amount. And that information's all on my website, BobbiRebell.com, and they can help students that way as well.
So after I did the interview with Bobbi, Lydia, she challenged us to tell our role model stories on the air. So now I'm going to put you on the spot and get you to tell yours.
So I probably need to backtrack. Right after I graduated from college, I moved to London. And of course, my mom being a good mom, I get this email saying, it's tax end of years, get your tax return done. And I'm asking around at work, and I'm like, do we need to fill out a tax return? And people were looking at me like, what are you talking about? And of course, my team was saying, no, you don't need to fill anything out. And they were known for pulling pranks on me.
Full disclosure, you weren't working at PwC.
I was not working at PwC
Okay.
at the time. And so then fast forward 5 years from that, I moved back to the US, and I get the same reminder from my mom, now you're back in the US, don't forget your tax return. So I fill all the paperwork out, I send it to my accountant, and I get this letter back saying that I owe all of this tax to federal and state.
For those
and
5 years?
I actually don't even know. I still don't know. And so next thing you know, I'm calling my mom and asking if I could borrow some money because I don't have enough money set aside to pay my taxes. So yeah, lesson learned. I still don't know what I'm doing.
Lesson learned, pay your taxes. Hashtag pay your taxes.
Hashtag pay my taxes and hashtag I still need tax advice. So Mitch, you've got to have a better story than that.
I don't know if it's better. I do pay my taxes, but when I graduated from college 30 plus years ago, I bought suits because back in those days we wore suits. I guess we wear them today sometimes too. And I borrowed money. I got a credit card and I got like 10% off in the store for opening a store card. Well, 1 month came along and I didn't even have the money for the minimum payment. Sadly, I was only making the minimum payment, not realizing how bad interest was. In any event, a notice came that I didn't pay and I ignored it. And I thought like the repo man was going to come and take my suits away. That never happened, so I just continued not to pay it. I finally settled it all when I had sufficient funds to do so. Fast forward 30 years, literally I'm refinancing my home in the last few years. It's still on my credit report.
Oh my goodness.
That deadbeat issue I had 3 decades earlier is still on my credit report. So.
Hope the suits were worth it.
I don't fit in them anymore, though, just for the record. Well, we have a great episode for you next week, so please make sure to catch it. If you're a binge watcher, it's going to pop up automatically. By the way, Bobbi told me that she is a binge watcher, so it's possible, Lydia, that our show is becoming a thing, as my kids would call it.
So does that mean that we're trending?
I don't know if we're trending yet, but they should follow us on Twitter.
We might be the next YouTube sensation.
We could be.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to catch up on all of our episodes, which are available on PwC's YouTube page. And of course, you can follow us at the Twitter handle below. We'll see you next time on 7 Day Yield.